Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the I'm Listening Co podcast. Today's guest is Orien Harvey. He is the man behind Humans of Cottesloe. It's a page, Facebook group and Instagram page. He's inspired by the Humans of New York book, which is quite big. In this episode, we talked to Orien about how he got started on the project, where the idea came from, his motivations and inspirations, a little bit about photography, but also about walking up to people and talking to them on the beach and the kind of the journey behind that. So a great little episode. I'm excited for you guys to hear it.
Kind of like I could do a project too, you know. Like I come down to the beach kind of every Sunday as my sort of reset switch and just a way to break from work and all the other responsibilities for a few hours. But maybe I could do a little more than that. Maybe I could actually get back into the photography in a bigger way. I mean, I didn't think all of those thoughts right at that moment, but I think that's kind of what came from that. That was the spark. Anyway, it was just there was a particular afternoon, a morning, I should say, when I chatted to this other photographer and that spark was sown. And so every weekend after, I started bringing my camera down with me. And initially, it was just I'd take some scenic kind of photos, and then I was like, this is okay, but it's not really, I need to do more than that, or I want to do more than that. And so at some point I actually worked up the courage to actually walk up to someone and say the big question, can I take your photograph? Because that's
scary.
That is actually
crossing that line
big time, stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And there was, there's a variety of reasons why I decided I wanted to, broach or cross that line. And I guess maybe be good to talk about my inspiration, I suppose. Obviously Humans of New York, Brandon Stanton is a big inspiration, but even more so than that, I think, is my cousin, Jack Scrine, who actually lives over in Halifax now in Nova Scotia. He published a book, I think only about 6 months ago, called Halifax.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And, so that was a bit of a inspiration as well. I thought, maybe I can have a crack at something in a similar vein. And so that's what I tell people when I approach them. I'm working on this project. It's on Facebook at the moment, but the ultimate goal's a book.
Yeah. It's I had a quick look the other day. I think something like 1,300.
Followers, you mean?
The posts, I think it was. There's
a ridiculous number of posts. Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
So. And I look back
I'll just get you to. Sorry.
I look back on the period of time from, I guess, December last year through to I think it was late April. I managed to keep a post every day. Not necessarily a photo and a story, but a post every day. I think I had a photo of a person with a story sort of every second day. That's how I was able to do that. And I did that because as a teacher, I got, fortunately, like a nice long 6-week break, and I just really threw myself into a big way into the project. I really just sort of got into this kind of a flow state where I was, I just loved what I was doing. I was coming down every day, sometimes twice a day, in the morning, in the afternoon. And I kind of built up enough photos, enough stories kind of recorded, that I had a queue going so I could kind of buffer myself when I wasn't able to get down to the beach, when I went back to work. I had a very stressful kind of start to the year. I mean, teaching's always stressful at the start of the year, but this one was particularly so because I'd taken on this extra level of responsibility as head of learning area, covering for my boss's maternity leave. So I had all of that going on. But yeah, I still, in some ways it's interesting. I think the project kind of kept me somewhat sane as well. Just having something that was very meaningful still happening in the background of all that even though I was hard pressed to find the time to do it, it was still, in some ways, on reflection, really, it was good that it was there. And since April, I have not been able to keep that one post every day thing going, because that's just the reality, I think, of full-time work and 3 kids, and if only this was my full-time job, but it's not,
I that resonates with me, because I very similarly, I think when you're starting something like like a piece of work that is something you're passionate about, you kind of almost kind of force yourself to put more energy into it. You set up like a regular, consistent, like I'll do this amount of times, and sort of build a routine around that. I did like a weekly post as like my intention. I was doing every Wednesday, I'd post on a Wednesday, and I'd hopefully capture something that can kind of put a little bit of a video together. But the time you miss that, you feel terrible. You're like, I know I'm going back against this commitment I made, but it's almost like it's still doing it. Like the commitment is just you put in your own mind, like you're the one that created it. Like it's like you're holding yourself accountable.
Well, I mean, no one necessarily knows that that was my personal commitment. That's right. I have to remember that sometimes. But I think you get caught up too. It's like, with Facebook and building followers, for this project, there's this whole idea around, you've got to have this consistent post to sort of at the same time, every day, to build,
maintain engagement,
your audience, maintain engagement, and it's a lot, it can be a lot, to try and stay on top of that.
Yeah.
But so it's still going, and it's more like 1 to 2 sort of posts a week.
It's still a lot. That's still really good. Like really impressive.
Yeah. And it's also winter, so there's I've noticed a lot less sort of people around when I'm down there.
Yeah,
it's typically pretty early on a Sunday morning. Yeah.
Do you find that? I mean, what's the biggest thing you've found from doing that that's changed the way you interact with people? Because I feel like I've noticed once you start having more conversations with more people regularly, it seeps into like all the other facets of your life. You're not afraid to have that conversation with a stranger at the cafe or on the bus, or where you would previously probably like be really closed off to that, right?
Yeah, I think we typically can be quite prejudiced in a way, prejudiced to thinking that I can't really talk to that person there. Well, they're not going to want to talk to me, or and I've had that kind of blown out of the water so many times now. Like, just number one, talking to someone who for some reason I thought they looked like the sort of person you couldn't really approach. Once you strike that match, that conversation, it leads to like some real wow moments with some of the stories that have come out. Yeah, I remember one of the first photos I did was, I'll just backtrack a second. I was walking down the beach, and it was very early. It was probably 5:45 in the morning. This guy doing yoga on his own, and was in he's standing upside down, a star pose, or he's standing upside down, he's doing a handstand basically, and I was like, do you mind? Can I take your photo? I'm just working on this project. And he was like, no worries. I took his photo, and then I struck up a conversation, and it turned out he literally had suffered a major cardiac event, and pretty much died in a gym some time back, and if it wasn't for there was a doctor there at the time, if it wasn't for that person being there, he wouldn't be alive today. And he told me this whole story. I just walked away. I just remember walking away from that, thinking, wow, that story was always there. It was only because I had that conversation that I knew about, and I just thought, oh, there's a cool photo, but there's the thing, right? It was so much more than that. It was this whole story behind it, and that's the biggest thing I've learnt too. Is that like when you pair a photo with a story, I think there's just so much more meaning to it.
Yeah, there was obviously something that gravitated you towards the people element of it. Like you mentioned at the start, you were taking photos of like landscapes and doing the photography element, which is obviously probably what I'm assuming that's probably what you did in the past with your photography, right? That was what you kind of knew, or maybe how you learnt to take photography, because it's all framing and a lot of I think the basics of photography start with that, right?
Yeah, I've always been interested in people in some way in my photographs. Yeah, so it's very rare that I kind of would want like an empty landscape. I think we're human. I think people are the most fascinating and interesting things to photograph generally. And so it's increasingly just become about getting closer and closer to people. It's not about shooting from a long way away with a long lens and grabbing a photo of someone. It's about getting quite up close and personal and asking some quite personal questions, really. And then in the process of that, there just seems to be some nice moments that unfold sort of as you're talking to someone, where you can almost see, you just get a feeling for who they are, and some great shots come out of that. Yeah, so that's been really quite interesting to explore that.
Do you feel in a way that it's changed the way you teach?
Well, that's an interesting question. The way I teach, like professionally as a teacher.
Yeah. Or maybe the way you interact with the students.
I mean, I think I'm always conscious of the fact that everyone's got a backstory that you don't know about. Has it changed the way I teach? I don't know that it has. It's definitely changed the way that I'm more prepared to approach people. Yeah, and I'm much more aware that everyone's got a story. Yeah, which I wasn't really cognizant of before I started this project. Yeah, everyone's got a story to tell, and one form or another.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do kind of ties into that. Yeah. It resonates a lot. I think that's why I was really drawn to what you were doing, because I think a lot of what I was wanting to do was connect with people. I realized that it's all well and good having a conversation with someone, but a lot of it is sort of surface level. I think sometimes when you put yourself out there in a very vulnerable situation, like approaching a stranger at the beach or setting up a table in the public space and inviting people to come sit and talk with you, you open up this dialogue that previously wasn't there. Like you said, you kind of overcome this obstacle and you connect very abruptly sometimes, but almost to a level of like you brush past the small talk, you brush past topics like the weather and really basic kind of surface level conversations, and you have more deeper connection. You kind of talk
Hopefully,
about.
Yeah. Not always.
No, of course.
I'm still very much learning. So not all my interactions have been successful. Most of them have, but it's definitely a skill that you learn as you go along. It's drawing these things out takes time, and sometimes it's only like it might be 40 minutes into a conversation when actually like you get to it takes that long to get to the heart of that person's story, the story that they've got to tell. Like it doesn't come out, that little bit till you've been doing it for a while. And that's been interesting for me.
Do you find, and this is something I've found as well, do you find showing that curiosity in people and showing that interest in them opens those doors? Like when you ask the question, you look to sort of learn more about them?
Yes, you have to. I mean, you have to come at it with a certain amount of energy, I guess, and that passion and that sense that you're genuine needs to be there. And I think that's I can tell people get that when I talk to them, that like, you know, I'm doing this and I believe in it. But yeah, people I've rarely had a knockback, which is super interesting. Like, you'd kind of think doing something like this that, you know, a lot of people might say no thanks, you know, or I'd rather not. And it's the vast minority that actually decline a conversation. When I have explained like what I'm doing and what I'd like to do and can I take your photo, it's maybe it's probably less than 1 in 10. Yeah.
That kind of ties back into what you mentioned around having the prejudice in the way of judging a book by its cover and thinking, why would this person want to talk to me? Yep. I think everyone can kind of experience a part of that. I think because we've been so isolated, it's so easy to not have those conversations that it's really easy to think that nobody wants to talk because they maybe look busy or they're not interested to talk to you, or like, what would you even talk about, right?
I think maybe you've got a slightly tougher job too, because like I've got the photography, so it's like I can put that straight out there. I'm working on this project. It's photos, but then I can build the conversation as well. Whereas you're just jumping in on tell me a story. But
whereas I would counter your point by saying you've got a harder job because you're approaching people. I sit there and people come to me. I find it a lot easier to just open up and kind of give the space for people. And that's why I've done it a little bit, because I want the people who come and sit down to almost like climb that hill themselves, almost in the way that you do it. I feel like a big piece of working up the courage to have a conversation with someone and talk to someone it's like the opportunity has to arrive where you feel like it. And I feel like I can create those opportunities as much as possible by just being present. Whereas you're on the lookout for those opportunities. How can I approach this person? And you're kind of navigating that constantly. So I'd say you've got...
And I am running through this thought process of, is this the right person too? Like there's, I don't just speak to the first person that I see. There's a certain amount of, I guess, intuition that comes with, I think that person looks like they would make for an interesting photograph, and I will probably target that person. So it's not everyone that I will approach.
Yeah. But the majority, like you said.
Yes, that's right.
But that's really interesting to me. I think I'm just so fascinated by, I think the reason I really want to talk to you and I think connect with you is that there's a lot of changes I've noticed from doing it in the 6 months. And I feel like you've probably talked to more people in the 6 months that I've been doing the listening table, in that you've approached people, you've like created, like, and you've put these posts up and like asked about what they're doing, and they're like asking their story. That I imagine a lot of that probably sits with you, and you kind of hold on to a lot of, I suppose, like the stories or things that people say to you. Like you mentioned the gentleman before who had the cardiac issue, and that's kind of was probably a while ago, but it still resonates with you and sits with you. I feel like there's probably a lot of like interesting stories and moments and connection pieces where you take a bit away from those connections.
There's some true stories of, heartbreak and tragedy out there. There's some really stories that quite touch me. The ex mayor, Lord Mayor Peter Nattrass, and his story of how he lost his son. That one had a particular connection to me, and that just came out of nowhere when I was talking to him. because his son had a basically a clot that broke away from the heart, and he died. And I also, so like I have a prosthetic heart valve as well. So when I was 17, I discovered almost by chance that something was amiss. I was sitting with my brother in my grandfather's car. My grandfather was a GP, and GPs have stethoscopes lying around. I was listening to my heart, listening to my brother's heart, and my brother's heart had a defined boom 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 boom, nice defined rhythm, and mine was just a whoosh sound. And I got my grandfather to listen that evening. He had a listen, and I think he grew a few grey hairs right then and there, but he didn't want to scare me. And he said, "Oh, you need to see a specialist, like next week." And I think I was on the operating table within 2 weeks later, having open heart surgery to replace a narrowed or a stenosed aortic heart valve. So I've got this prosthetic heart valve, and one of the things I have to be careful of is dental procedures where you can end up dislodging like a plaque, getting into your bloodstream, and then clumping on that valve, and then that can break away, and you end up with a stroke, like an aneurysm. And it was So when I was talking to Peter Natras, it was his son had, as he explained it, had a dental procedure, and that's what led to this clot that broke away. So there was that connection there to that story. So but all sorts, and I think the interesting thing about this project, which really sits in one place, this one stretch of beach, is that even though it's Cottesloe, and we think of Cottesloe as a wealthy area, doesn't matter. You still have your stories of love and loss and tragedy. It's all there.
Yeah.
And it was, I think that's the interesting thing with this project, is that it is just this one stretch of beach, and the ocean is a great equaliser in many ways. We all come down to the ocean for different reasons. Some people just to reset, or for some people it's for the fitness and swimming, but you get people from lots of outlying areas all coming to this one place. And so to my mind, I'm like, I had people that said, "Oh, why don't you do Humans of Perth?" I'm like, well, I could do Humans of Perth, but I love the ocean myself, and I think you get the full spectrum of people coming to this one place anyway. So it's almost like what you were saying, like you set up and you wait for people to come. Well, I guess I kind of set up, in this one patch of beach, and kind of wait and see who turns up as well. But I still have to just approach people that turn up.
Yeah. I feel like when people try to suggest stuff on top of, it's your passion, your project, right? And I think a lot of it, the reason you do it is for getting obviously more in touch with your photography, but also then connecting with people. And that's the enjoyment piece you get out of it, and that's kind of the connection piece. When sort of maybe someone tries to push you to do more, do something different, it feels a little bit disnatural, and then you're kind of doing it for others, it feels like, right?
Yeah, it's like I perhaps need to branch out to other areas, other beaches, and broaden the audience for this project. But I'm kind of wedded to this idea of this one spot and this one place, and just exploring that really, really fully. So it is, it's kind of hard to break. I'm close to doing it, but I'm still just sticking at the one place.
That could be the second book.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I really like that. Do you feel more connected to the community than you ever have doing this? Given that that's obviously your place you go to now, that's the area you go and where you talk to people and you sit up.
Oh yeah, far more than ever before. And I met a lot of amazing people. I've certainly witnessed some amazing examples of community too. Like the Pod Squad were quite sort of, perhaps in some ways instrumental when I first started out this project. And for those of you who don't know, the Pod Squad is quite a large group. I think there's, they're in the hundreds that regularly swim every morning from North Cott to Cott and back all through the year, like even some of them in the middle of winter. And there is such an amazing sense of camaraderie and community in that group. Shane McGurk's really instrumental in that, and he was one of the stories I did was about him. He won. He was one of the Australians of the year, and that was really inspiring. Not I was almost part of me was like, gee, I should join these guys. I should get out there swimming every day, because you could see what getting together and doing something like that did for people. Yeah, they were all a great bunch of people. You could just see that sense of community. So I've seen that. I've met a lot of people, and when I turn up now, there wouldn't be a morning where I wouldn't actually meet someone who I've spoken to before, and that's great. Yeah, because it's not, that's not how I used to. That's not how I used to move around, and yeah.
What's been some of the response from people that follow the page, either on Facebook or on Instagram? Has there been people that have reached out to you or sort of like left you with nice messages? Or obviously there's interest there, so there's a following. What's been some of the interactions you've had with fans or followers?
I don't tend to comment on the comments, but there's been a lot of nice, gorgeous comments that have happened as a response to posts, and people, I suppose people reconnecting. It's been great because it has meant that people have been able to connect and see this other side or this story to someone that they've seen around, but they didn't know the full story. So I really enjoy. My role is really just as a moderator and to make sure there aren't any untoward or sort of comments that don't belong in that space. Jean from the Cottesloe Surf Lifesaving Club, I remember her story was a great example of that. There was at least 20 people that responded to that post, just going, Jane, you're amazing. I remember when, I think, I hope you're doing well. So that really brought about, a whole back and forward kind of conversation.
What's motivating you to keep going?
Good question. Well, I'm committed to I'm just committed. So it's I wouldn't want to step away from it. I still enjoy the process, of finding that shot, getting the story, meeting people. So I'm still going to keep doing that. And I just kind of want to see where this goes. I'm just going to keep going. I reckon I've got a whole, another summer to explore this more fully. There's still a lot of leads that I have yet to follow. Like I've got people that have said, I know such and such, they've got this amazing story to tell, and so I've yet to follow up those kind of leads. That's a bit more of like a process of tracking down leads and gathering those stories that way. I think there's a whole underworld too that I haven't explored. So the underwater side aspect of Cottesloe, I'd like to get a whole lot more photographs of the what it looks like from underneath. I think would be a nice one just to add to the series as well.
Yeah. What is it about that particularly?
Oh, I just think it's just visually stunning, and otherworldly. I'm just thinking of shots where you have a pod of swimmers swimming over the top in silhouette, or people that are fresh dived into the water, that the kind of free floating ethereal kind of compositions that arrive out of that would be great to capture and add to the story as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, do you have some photographers that are inspiration to you?
So Trent Park and Narelle Ortio are quite famous for their series, The Seventh Wave, which explored the underwater world at Bondi Beach, and they created this amazing series of like stark, high contrast, black and white shots of swimmers sort of upturned in a wave, or in these configurations, a bit like like an underwater dance. Like I'm thinking of, what do you call it when you have you've got swimmers
synchronized?
Yeah, it's
synchronized
So that would be a nice angle to pursue a little as well.
What was it about that particularly resonated with you? Was it something like an emotion it evoked, or something that kind of like, was it more like I could do that? With that sort of
they're amazing. Look, the shots are amazing to look at. If you ever check them out, they're just incredibly well composed, and just there's so much energy in them, and they're just beautiful. They are, like I said, that ethereal, kind of otherworldly, and dreamlike. So, yeah, and I'd like to. Yeah, I think I could do that, with the right gear. Have a go, get some of those sort of shots as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Talk us through, I'm just kind of conscious of time. I would love to just hear your approach to approaching someone. So run us through a scenario of you at the beach.
Yep.
And you're looking for a target
Yeah.
or some talent.
Yeah.
How is it that you approach them, or kind of mark someone as like, I would love to talk to this person in particular? Like, I'd love to kind of hear the process behind it.
I'm sort of.
Was it a feeling? It's
it is a feeling. It's interesting, but I'm sort of visually running it through my head. You know, that could that work? You know, is the light? How's it going to work? Is the light right? You know, and if all the ingredients are there, and it is, I think it's just it's a feeling like, oh, there's a shot there. There's a story there. Then I'll just muster up some courage and approach that person. It might be like, excuse me, look, really random, I know, but I'm working on a photo project and hopefully a book one day called Humans of Cottesloe, and I'd really love to take your photograph. And also, you know, if we can have a conversation and get a story to go with it, you know, what do you think? And we go from there. And typically people will, you know, they'll find out a little bit more about it. So it'll be like, so it's, what's the book about? You know, and I'll just explain. Yeah, it's just Humans of Cottesloe. It's this one patch of beach. You know, I've been working on it for 6 months. And yeah, what's your story, basically? So yeah, what is your story? And then from there, it just hopefully evolves into asking some quite, or sometimes personal questions, really. You know, things like what's been your greatest regret, perhaps, or when have you been happiest, or what do you most look forward to? But yeah, the questions that can ask just to kind of, you know, evolve organically, just in response to their responses.
Yeah, it's like an in the moment thing, right? You don't
that's right.
pre-plan a lot of it. A lot of it is reactive, and I suppose like the whole premise behind it is very reactive because the constant is the beach, the constant is Sunday, the ritual, the routine you have is like the format, but then whatever happens in that space or whatever happens in that beach, the person you talk to, the conversation you have is ever changing, and that's the beauty of it because it's different every time. It's a different conversation. It's a different person. That's what keeps it fresh and exciting for you, I imagine, is that it's different every time you do. It's the same place, but it's different every time to a degree, right?
It's different every time, yeah, very much. And I mean, because I'm down there every week, I think it helps too that most people have at some point, you know, it's quite likely that they've seen me floating around at some point as well. There's that guy with the camera, and so I think that helps. Yeah, I've had some interesting experiences. I've even you know, jumped in the water on occasion with a small waterproof camera to chase a shot. And it's been, you know, pleasantly surprised when someone agreed. Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're at the beach and people are quite you know, vulnerable in lots of ways. You know, like you're half dressed typically. So I kind of marvel at the fact that I've approached people, you know, in Speedos for photos.
Yeah, that's good.
And
do you have a background in is like this was an interest obviously to kind of the person behind the story? Like, is that been an interest to you?
I did when I first finished uni. You know, I studied photography in Melbourne back in, I think it was 2001 to 2003, and after that I did a little bit of freelancing for Outback magazine. So I was, you know, I travelled out to South Australia and like the far north of South Australia, and I went to like Lightning Ridge, and I just did a bit of freelance work, and I think maybe that's where the story side of it started. I guess that gave me an insight into, I can do that. But really, that cottoning on to the fact that photos are so much more powerful with, if you have a story to go with it, that insight is really what makes the project so much more meaningful. It wouldn't work if these were just, it really wouldn't work on the level that it needs to if they were just photos.
Yeah. Something I find with listening and having a lot of conversation with people and then trying to create content off the back of that, and this is something I personally struggle with, is doing the story justice and really trying to make sure I'm painting the person in a light that, if it's an emotion or a feeling or a story they've told me, to kind of make sure it's reflected in that state and it's that good. Do you find something similar that you ever struggle or juggle with the story and like capturing it to a way that you feel like comfortable or you feel like the person would be happy with, or is it more easier? Do you find it easier? I'm interested.
It's not easy. No, it's not easy. I'll record the conversation, and I'll go back over it and try and pull the threads out of it that are true to what the person was saying, and I will. When I write it, it's not necessarily going to be the things that they've said. I'm not necessarily going to put them down in the same order, but I won't put words in their mouth. So I'll pull the threads out, maybe change the order so that it flows, and normally there's enough in there to do that, to have a reasonable paragraph or chunk of story. Sometimes it's the reverse. Sometimes it's a challenge cutting it down, because the reality is I think people don't have a huge amount of time. Attention spans are not necessarily that long, so there's kind of a happy medium there. It can there is a thing where it can be too long. Short is better, I think, as long as it gets to the heart of the story. Yeah.
That makes sense, and I can relate a lot.
And and it depends too on how well the conversation, that initial conversation, went. Yeah, it depends to what degree people opened up or were prepared to be vulnerable and reveal, those more hidden aspects. And one of the tips that my cousin Jack gave me was a great question you can ask is, tell me something that everyone who knows you knows about you, but also tell me something that everyone who knows you doesn't know about you. So you sort of come at it with that first one first, and then hit them with the second one. And sometimes that works quite well. Yeah,
that's interesting. I'm just conscious of time. I'd love to finish on a couple of questions that I want to sort of do as a bit of a theme across the podcast. The first one being, if you had an extra hour every day, how would you spend it?
No question, it would be extra hour. Ooh. See, an extra hour is not quite enough for me to get
to the
because
beach.
It takes me half an hour to get to the beach and half an hour to get back. An extra hour. Well, look, I tell you what, honestly, I am pretty short on time, and I could actually use that hour. I definitely could use that hour. I've still got material that I still need to go back on. I've still got interviews that I haven't pulled the threads out of and turned into a post. So yeah, give me an extra hour. I'd go through those. I'd probably sift through all my stuff and really get it 100% organised, categorised, and
So the extra hour you'd put back into your passion.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I just don't have that time at the moment. Yeah, really, really don't. School holidays are great. They come along every 10 weeks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. That's a good answer. The second question, is there a quote or a motto off the top of the dome that you live by and that you love that you can share with us? I'll get you to say this one into the mic. Yeah.
Oh, look, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one that's definitely come up in the course of doing this, for sure. Yeah, that's the one that comes to mind straight off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like you've put it into practice. That's the difference. So you're living that. You have first-hand experience of that now. I think that's probably why it resonates a lot more than it ever has potentially.
Yeah, and that quote came from one of my subjects at one point, a lady that was heavily covered in tattoos. Yeah, it was like, don't judge a book by its cover, because in that situation, people all too often do. Yeah,
that's great, awesome. That's it. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate you coming in and having a conversation with me. It's awesome to hear a lot more about yourself and I suppose Humans of Cottesloe behind the scenes, and I suppose your journey to it and inspirations and what kind of keeps you going and things you'd like to take with it. So I really appreciate you coming in and taking the time today. It's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. Hi guys, that's the end of the episode. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode, but until then, please follow, like and subscribe across Spotify, YouTube or Amazon, and also follow the social media accounts on Instagram and TikTok. If you would like to be a guest or a partnership and collaborate with I'm Listening Co, please reach out on the socials or send me an email. But until next time, thanks for listening.